Your country is dying. Not from war, not from disaster, but from people vanishing. Across the globe, birth rates are plunging and populations collapsing. Some nations are now on the brink of extinction. As the elderly overwhelm the young, entire societies could unravel, and once thriving countries may disappear from the map. What does this mean for the future of humanity? On today's Infographics Show, we're exploring the nations most at risk of population collapse and what happens when the people are simply gone. Population collapse, it's been on everyone's lips. Birth rates all over the world have been plummeting. People just aren't having kids these days, and it's unlikely that that'll change soon. To cope, some countries have turned to mass immigration, though this brings its own social challenges. Others are spending billions to convince young natives to procreate, but that too has proven far from an easy solution. It is a mess, and no one knows how things will work out. Japan has been hit hard, as has a lot of Asia, so let's start there. In 2025, the media reported that Japan's annual births had fallen to a record low, which is being called a population emergency. The population has been in a state of decline since 2008. Birth rates are nowhere near enough to meet population replacement levels. Without enough newborns, the future could be a dwindling economy and a steep decline in well-being. And the numbers don't lie. Japan's health ministry recently said around 686,000 babies were born in 2024, a decrease of 5.7% from 2023. Not since 1899 have births been so low, and this is Japan's 16th year of decline. Culturally and politically, Japan has never been big on mass immigration. Only about 3% of the population is foreign-born, compared with roughly 15% in the US and 16% in the UK. The US and UK have long had traditions of immigration shaping their societies. Japan has not. In Japan, many policymakers and much of the public are wary of large-scale immigration. They fear it could undermine social harmony in a society that praises demographic stability and cultural conformity. Recently, the government even had to dismiss online rumors that Japan was preparing for mass immigration from Africa, calling that misinformation. The fact that those rumors caused so much panic shows how sensitive the topic is. But what will happen in the future if old people greatly outnumber young people? Japan's National Institute of Population and Social Security Research estimates that between 1/4 and 1/3 of women born in 2005 will never have children. The outlook for men is even starker. The same researchers project that nearly half of Japanese men are now entering adulthood and may remain childless for life. Surveys suggest the reasons are what you would expect. Raising children is seen as too difficult, too expensive, and too incompatible with the work and lifestyle pressures young people face. Young men, more than women, are on the shelf and they're gonna stay there. Fewer Japanese people of all ages are getting married these days. Many Japanese women, in a country that is quite conservative, feel marriage places too many expectations on them. That's one reason why in 2024 the average woman in Japan had just 1.1 children. The replacement rate is 2.1, a target that many nations are now failing to meet. Japan's Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare said that in 1980 only 2% of males aged 50 to 54 hadn't tied the knot. Fast forward to 2020 and that number was a staggering 26.6%. For women, 4.5% of the same age weren't married in 1980 compared to 16.5% in 2020. To understand why, we can look at the surveys. For women, 40.5% said marriage would limit activities and lifestyle. For men, 42.5% blamed the loss of financial leeway. For both, the other top answers were that they don't see the benefits and they don't feel the need. Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba was right to say the not having babies thing is a silent emergency. Technology may soften the blow and do some of the work in the future, but if birth rates keep falling, the outlook is super grim. You need people to run services, pay taxes, and for major powers, fill armies. You need them to spend money. A shrinking population means fewer consumers to drive the economy and fewer young innovators to create growth. If you don't have people, entire towns hollow out as schools close and communities vanish. In terms of balance of power, with fewer citizens, a nation's global influence will fade away. The US and UK don't throw open the doors to immigration out of some pure love of diversity. They did it because they need the numbers. More workers, more taxpayers, a bigger base to keep their economies afloat. But politicians rarely put it that way, likely because they fear inflaming the public or triggering a populist backlash. But in Japan, the blunt truth, or the public relations tactic, would be a hard sell to the public that, for the most part, would not embrace rapid demographic changes. But if it did open its doors, the population decline might be less drastic. In Europe, between 2000 and 2018, immigration accounted for 80% of population change. In North America, it was 32%. Immigrants tend to have more babies. Still, for Japan, it seemed mass immigration is not in the cards. That said, the current population of around 124 million could turn to just 87 million by 2070. Currently, Japan is already an old place, with 29.8% of people being over 65. But if things carry on like researchers expect, that could reach almost 40% in 2060. It's just not sustainable. We'll get to the Western nations later, but let's stick with Asia and look at South Korea. It too has a very low birth rate. Since 2015, the rate has steadily declined, reaching just 0.78 children per woman in 2022, and falling further to 0.72 in 2023. The capital, Seoul, recorded the lowest figure of all, at just 0.55. The central bank said some of the main reasons were the cost of childcare and housing, and also employment insecurity. This is a worldwide problem, and it only got worse during the lockdowns. That was also when we witnessed the greatest transfer of wealth from poor to rich in modern history. Why have kids, people were thinking, when there's no stability? And now we're seeing profound changes in the workplace with AI, maybe leading to mass unemployment. Nothing feels stable, which is reflected in birth rates. Still, the Korean government has gotten very serious about it, recently assuring its people that it is taking extraordinary measures. It spent many billions of dollars on campaigns to convince this traditionally very hardworking society to produce the future population. Since 2006, $270 billion has gone to areas like childcare subsidies. The government right now is paying almost $1,500 in cash payments for new parents. In Seoul, the government is offering $685 for anyone who registers a marriage. But better still, in 2022, the city introduced the $4.58 billion birth support project aimed at getting young parents into affordable housing while opening cheap daycare centers. And if love isn't in the air in Seoul, the local government is trying to add some. On Valentine's Day in 2025, it held a romance art night, offering champagne dinners for 50 men and 50 women if after looking into each other's eyes they agreed to date. It seems to have worked. Half of those people ended up in relationships. There's more. The government has started offering fathers 20 days of paid paternity leave. It also has eased the burden of childcare costs for new parents. Flexible work hour schemes have been introduced, along with subsidies for employers to help them hire replacements when a mother or a father is temporarily absent. And it might be working. In 2024, the country saw the first increase in births for a long time, posting the average up from 0.72 to 0.75. There were also 14.9% more marriages that year. Korea is not quite as old as Japan, with 20% of the population being over 65, and it is certainly doing a lot to ensure it won't be as old as Japan in the future. And what about the USA's nemesis, China? For the US, China's population problem could mean the difference between first and second place in the global power stakes. Like Korea, China is spending some serious money to get its citizens producing offspring. With current birth rates at just 1 or 1.2 children per woman, China is very concerned. If a 2024 UN report is correct, the country's 1.4 billion population could shrink to 1.3 billion by 2050 and 633 million by 2100. The Chinese are also masters of leaving. In the 1990s, millions moved abroad, and today about 10.5 million Chinese citizens live outside of the country. Tens of millions more left in recent decades. Yet inside China itself, only 0.1% of the population is foreign-born. Besides Singapore, all of the Asian nations on our list today make it very hard for foreign people to emigrate there and gain full citizen rights. Meanwhile, Western nations have been open to Asian immigration, offering full citizenship relatively easily. The reasons are complex, related to economic needs, cultural considerations, language, and even geopolitics and the legacy of colonialism. Still, maybe China will open up in the future. One of China's more recent family-friendly policies is offering epidural anesthesia during childbirth, now standard in large hospitals and set to expand to smaller ones by 2027. The government also has turned to in vitro fertilization, or IVF, to encourage more births, making it part of public health insurance and subsidizing the costs. Once prohibitively expensive, IVF is now far more accessible. In Beijing alone, after insurance began covering it in 2023, close to 32,000 people used the service. By early 2024, a report noted that 27 provinces had expanded similar coverage. This included IVF, embryo freezing, and intrauterine insemination. with about 1.03 million people benefiting. Financial carrot and stick incentives are also being rolled out. Nationwide, new couples can receive a one-off payment of $1,500, $500 annually for 3 years. Local governments have added their own bonuses. The city of Hohhot, for example, currently offers 100,000 yuan, around $14,000 to couples who have 3 children. Still, these payouts don't go very far. Research suggests that raising a child in China to age 17 costs almost $76,000. But that is still much less than in the US, where the Brookings Institution estimated in 2022 that the cost was over $310,000. So, is it working? Kind of. In 2023, China recorded just 9.02 million births, the lowest on recent record. But in 2024, the number was 9.54 million. Not bad, though still far below replacement level. It'll take a lot to climb back to the 1990s level of about 2.51 births per woman. Like everywhere else, the cost of living in China is high. On top of that, it has one of the highest female labor force participation rates in the world, and women consistently outperform men in higher education. Many simply don't want to slip into the traditional role of mother in what remains a patriarchal society. The government has been trying hard to change that, especially when it comes to single women sometimes labeled shengyu or leftover women. Local authorities have organized mass speed dating events to get women paired off with men. With marriage registrations plunging, some cities have even offered marriage payouts of around $5,500. This is another reason why the West is taking the immigration route. The people can be very independent. Thailand is another country staring down a demographic disaster. In 1970, its fertility rate was 5.4 children per woman. Today, it's among the lowest in the world at around 1.2, though The Atlantic put it at 0.98. Unlike richer nations with sturdy pension systems, Thailand has a threadbare safety net. For rural families, children traditionally look after their parents in old age. But if hardly anyone is having children, who will care for today's young workers when they themselves grow old? Last year, the country saw around 462,000 births, the first time the number has dropped below 500,000 since 1949. This was the 4th year in a row that deaths outnumbered births. Like other nations in Southeast Asia, people are stressed about the cost of living, but Thailand is way worse in the birth rate stakes than all the other nations in the region. Why? Simply put, Thailand has become more expensive in recent years. It's more developed than its neighbors, but average wages remain quite low. Add in the lack of strong state support systems, the fact that women are excelling in education and the workplace, and the persistence of a largely patriarchal culture. And together they create a perfect recipe for low fertility. The government has talked about changes, launching the Give Birth Great World campaign. Subsidies for in vitro fertilization and tax breaks for families with 2 or more kids have been floated, but so far they're at the discussion stage. Officials also talk about improving education to create a more productive workforce, but that doesn't solve the underlying numbers problem. If current trends stay, Thailand's population could fall to 40 million or less within 50 years, leaving just 22.8 million of working age. By the end of the century, the population might halve, and that's a recipe for extreme instability. Immigration isn't seen as a major fix either. Just like in Japan, China, and Korea, Thai culture is relatively quite insular. Only about 5% of residents are foreign-born, although recent increases might have pushed it higher. Still, long-term residency for foreigners with citizenship rights included, even if married with children, remains very rare, in part due to protectionist policies. In 2025, the government did grant legal work rights to 80,000 people from Myanmar, but the numbers are small compared to the need, and work rights might not mean they stay in Thailand and have children. Cambodia is no longer a reliable labor source. About 400,000 Cambodians just left when conflict erupted. Some recruitment has shifted to Nepal, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and the Philippines, but again, in very modest numbers. And if immigration surged suddenly, social backlash could come with it, even though Thais are usually very tolerant and friendly. It's just how things are in much of Asia, although not in Singapore. Singapore, with a fertility rate of just 0.97, doesn't seem overly concerned either. Last year, the government encouraged citizens to have little dragons for the Year of the Dragon, a slogan more like a half-baked marketing campaign than a serious solution to one of the lowest birth rates on the planet. But with a population of just over 6 million, Singapore's problems might not be too difficult to overcome. The country welcomes immigrants, with an estimated 40% of citizens being foreign-born, and usually strictly vetted. In 2025, Senior Minister Lee Hsien Loong wrote, "Immigration is essential and existential for Singapore's survival," with politicians saying the country must remain open to attracting the world's best talent. A recent report noted that for every 30,000 babies born to Singaporean citizens each year, the country also takes in nearly 22,000 new citizens through immigration. In a city-state so small and wealthy, that balance means the low birth rate may not be the crisis it is elsewhere. Singapore's highly skilled workforce, small size, and world-class infrastructure insulate it from the fate of larger nations. In Japan and China, thousands of rural villages are close to being abandoned. In Thailand, entire childless villages may eventually disappear. Last on the list in Asia is Taiwan, which has one of the world's lowest fertility rates at just 0.87 children per woman. With a foreign-born population of about 4%, it's also not big on immigration. Recently, there was a controversy when bringing in Indian workers was discussed, resulting in a backlash that critics called xenophobic and racist. Like mainland China, Taiwan has leaned on assisted reproduction to boost numbers. By 2023, 17% of births involved some form of reproductive technology. In 2023, Taiwan reportedly had more cats and dogs than children under 10. For 3 years running, deaths outnumbered births, and the media bluntly called the looming labor shortage and super-aged society a national security threat. Marriage patterns are central to the problem. In 2023, only half of citizens aged 25 to 34 were married. About 61% of men were single compared with 43% of women. Among unmarried men, 70% said they wanted to marry, but only 46% of unmarried women felt the same. And 70% of respondents said they couldn't afford to raise children even if they wanted them. So far, Taiwan seems stuck in the same holding pattern as Thailand. Lots of talk, little decisive action. The National Development Council admitted in 2024 that the decline would be difficult to reverse, but it didn't really offer solutions. Local media warned that subsidies to reduce childbirth costs are nowhere near enough. Among the ideas floated is a kind of Uber for babysitters, an app to hire childcare on demand. With housing so expensive and financial insecurity widespread, one journalist recently described Taiwan's birth rate problem as an uphill battle with no guaranteed solutions. He noted that an influx of migrant labor has been suggested, but dismissed it as a short-sighted solution. Like much of Asia, Taiwan shows little appetite for ethnic diversification. Halfway across the world, Eastern Europe is facing one of the worst demographic collapses on the planet. Ukraine, with a fertility rate hovering around 1 child per woman, now ranks alongside the lowest birth nations in Asia. Some forecasts suggest it could rise modestly to 1.45 by the end of 2025, but that is nowhere near enough to offset the decline. It's not hard to see why. In a country at war, people are reluctant to have children. Millions also have left, most of them women. A recent report noted that 1 in 5 Ukrainians who left for Poland have applied for residency. With literally millions crossing the border, Poland now hosts 1.5 to 2 million Ukrainians. That influx has triggered tension. In 2025, anti-immigration demonstrations erupted in more than 80 cities, with protesters demanding that the government close borders with Lithuania, Ukraine, Belarus, and Slovakia. Some asylum seekers have also entered via Germany and Lithuania, adding to the strain. Protesters accusing the government of, quote, letting anyone in. The scale of Ukraine's demographic collapse is staggering. After the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, its population was about 52 million. Today it's down to roughly 38 million. Since the war began, around 5 million more have fled abroad, and many may never return to homes destroyed, flattened cities, or a country still plagued by inequality and extreme corruption. Poland itself faces a looming demographic disaster. It has one of Europe's lowest fertility rates, just 1.1 children per woman in 2025. That reality partly explains its open borders. Still, as in much of Europe, demographic shifts are fueling anti-immigration populism. This could dominate politics for decades, weakening social solidarity. Some even argue it serves as a divide-and-rule strategy by political elites. But with all of this protesting, only 2% of Poland's population is foreign-born. That's compared to Germany at 18%, UK 16%, and France at 13%. The influx has been quite sudden, but so have the shrinking birth rate numbers. In 1989, there were about 40 million Poles. Now there are around 37.5 million. In 2024, there were just 252,000 live births, down from 272,000 the year before. Meanwhile, deaths amounted to 409,000. The fact is, if trends continue, the future of Europe will be far more ethnically diverse than its past. For some, that's simply the new normal. Societies adapt, cultures blend, and life goes on. For others, it raises alarms, fears of diluted national identity, suspicions of governments importing cheap labor, or people that might embrace outright racism. Still, if people are hurting from mass immigration, ignoring them is never a sensible option. When anxieties go unaddressed, they can spill into social unrest and political upheaval. It's not like it hasn't happened in the past. And when you have a cost of living crisis and a 1 to 5% that's eating up all of the world's money, there could be problems. So what's the answer? Canadian academic Eric Kaufman, author of one of the key works on the subject, says, "Denial won't work. Instead, Europe and North America need sensible immigration policies backed by real government efforts to help newcomers adapt and embrace their new country. Without that, public resistance will only grow louder and possibly violent." He believes the fear of loss of identity is justified and should be met with smart and humane policies. It's not all about immigration. Some countries are concerned about people leaving. Across southern Europe, Spain, Italy, and Greece, entire towns are shrinking. Schools are closing and streets have fallen deathly quiet as buildings sit abandoned and crumbling. Policymakers face a brutal dilemma. Without immigration, economies shrink and services collapse. But with it, societies may fracture under the strain of rapid change. While Ukrainians flood into Poland, Polish politicians talk about the threat of the country losing its young and smart population to other countries. Many might choose England and Wales as their destination, which in 2025 reported a fertility rate of 1.41, the worst since records began in 1938. In August 2025, there were mass protests over there, which goes to show that immigration can come with societal problems, a story as old as time. And then you have nations like Bulgaria, Lithuania, and Latvia, all experiencing some of the steepest population declines in the world. Latvia is in effect vanishing. In 2022, media reports noted that its population had fallen by 30% since the 1990s. A government spokesperson said, "It's an existential problem. We will not stay Latvia without enough Latvians." For decades, younger Latvians have left for better-paying jobs in Western Europe, draining the country of both workers and future parents. In the past, people from nations where wages were low might have tried to emigrate but failed. But as birth rates have weakened, doors have opened. Wages in the UK, Germany, and Scandinavia may not come with sunny beaches, but they are high enough for workers to send money back home, often to grandparents in countries where pensions and healthcare are underfunded. Over time, many migrants settle permanently and their children grow up fully integrated. By 2050, more than 3/4 of the world's countries are projected to have birth rates below replacement level. By 2100, that figure will climb to 97%. Only a handful of nations, places like Samoa, Somalia, Tonga, Niger, Chad, and Tajikistan, are expected to still average 2.1 children per woman. People will move across borders in search of opportunity, testing which doors are open. Many will join streams of new workers, sometimes facing resentment from native populations, often those already struggling, who blame immigration for their difficulties. Governments must ensure that this transition is managed smoothly rather than becoming a shock to the system. What we're looking at isn't just shrinking birth charts, it's a possible rewiring of the global balance of power. Countries like Japan, Korea, and Poland risk growing older, poorer, and weaker. The US, Europe, and China will all struggle to maintain their numbers. Some nations may weather the population collapse, others may not. Whether the future is stable or chaotic will depend on how the world manages what is becoming the greatest demographic experiment in human history. If your country looks like it's dying, one big reason is clear: people just aren't having children. Watch, it's not just you. No one wants kids anymore. To see why birth rates are collapsing worldwide, or click on this video instead.